Motion in your step.
Motivation in your heart.
Hello, and welcome to today's Motion and Motivation podcast.
We've put together a study guide for everyone. If you need it, you can grab it from the video description.
Welcome to another deep dive with us.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be looking at
Diving deep.
diving deep exactly into Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last.
It's a good one.
Yeah. This is a book that I think a lot of people in sort of the business world have maybe heard of.
For sure.
And we're going to kind of dive into some of the core concepts in it today.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think what's really interesting about the book is that he kind of brings together this these kind of biological and anthropological perspectives on leadership and teamwork.
Yeah, and success in organizations.
Exactly.
So really looking at how our sort of primal instincts impact the way we work together.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think one of the things that really struck me about the book is that he reminds us that businesses, they're not just these sort of abstract entities with spreadsheets and numbers.
Right.
They're made up of people.
Yeah.
And these people are driven by these deep-seated biological needs.
Okay, so let's unpack that idea a little bit of biological needs.
Sure.
One of the first things that Sinek talks about in the book is this concept of the circle of safety. And he starts off with this incredible story of Johnny Bravo.
Oh, yeah.
The A-10 pilot.
Such a powerful story.
It is a powerful story.
To start the book off with.
So for those who haven't read it, maybe just give a quick recap of that story.
Absolutely. So Johnny Bravo is this A-10 pilot who's flying over Afghanistan, providing air support to troops on the ground.
Right.
And he gets this call that there's a unit that's pinned down. They're taking heavy fire, and they're in desperate need of help. And what's incredible is that Johnny Bravo goes against his orders.
Yeah, he risks his own life.
He puts his own life on the line to protect these soldiers.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't technically his mission.
Yeah, and they were...
And he didn't know them personally.
Yeah, it wasn't like his unit or anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was just this inherent instinct to protect those in his care.
It's like that deep sense of responsibility to protect the group.
And he didn't even think twice about it.
Yeah.
He just acted on pure instinct.
So obviously an incredible act of heroism.
Totally.
But how does this relate to, you know, the average workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Like, what's the connection there?
So think about the feeling that story evokes. This sense of security, trust, belonging, knowing that someone has your back no matter what.
Yeah.
That's the essence of the circle of safety that Sinek talks about.
So creating that kind of environment where people feel safe.
Absolutely.
Valued, cared for.
When we feel safe like we belong, we're more likely to cooperate, to communicate openly, to take risks, to be innovative.
So what happens when that feeling is missing?
Yeah, when that circle of safety
Is weak or non-existent.
Exactly.
Sinek uses another story.
He does, yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Ken, the bank executive.
As an example of sort of the opposite.
Right.
So what was Ken's story?
So Ken's story is really a cautionary tale of what happens when that circle of safety is broken.
Right.
Essentially, he felt completely unvalued, untrusted by his company.
Yeah.
It led to incredible stress, decreased productivity, and ultimately a desire to leave.
Yeah, he was like, I got to get out of here.
Exactly. And, you know, this lack of psychological safety is surprisingly common in workplaces.
Yeah, and it has real consequences.
Absolutely.
Like, it's not just a feel-good thing.
No, it impacts the bottom line.
Yeah.
It impacts people's well-being.
Sinek contrasts this with some pretty great examples of companies that get it right.
He does.
Like Barry Wehmiller.
Yeah.
I think their story about the furlough program during a tough economic time really stood out.
It's a great example.
Do you want to kind of recap what happened there?
Yeah, so Barry Wehmiller, this manufacturing company, they were hit hard by the recession.
Like many were.
Like many companies were.
Yeah.
And instead of resorting to layoffs, they decided to implement a furlough program.
Right.
So what that meant was everyone from the CEO
all the way down
to the frontline workers had to take a certain number of weeks of unpaid leave.
Right.
And what was remarkable was that many employees actually volunteered to take even more unpaid time off.
Wow.
To help their colleagues.
To protect each other.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
So that those who maybe had more financial security could take on a little bit more of the burden.
Right.
So that others who maybe were struggling could have a little bit more cushion.
Wow.
And you know what's really striking about that example is the understanding that the company's strength lies in its people.
In its people.
Right. They didn't see their employees
As expendable.
as just cogs in the machine.
Right.
They saw them as human beings,
Right.
as valuable assets.
So the takeaway for any leader out there listening
Yeah.
is that demonstrating genuine care for your team, especially during difficult times,
For sure.
can foster extraordinary loyalty.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just about goodwill.
Right.
It's about tapping into this fundamental human need for connection and belonging.
Yeah, feeling like you're part of something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. And it's not just about feeling safe physically. It's also about feeling safe emotionally, psychologically.
Right.
Knowing that you can be yourself.
Yeah.
You can speak your mind without fear of retribution.
And Sinek doesn't just stop at anecdotes.
He doesn't.
Right? He actually dives into the science behind this.
He gets into the biology.
Yeah.
The chemicals.
The actual chemicals at play in our brains.
That are driving our behavior.
So what are these magical chemicals?
All right. So he breaks down 4 primary chemicals that drive human behavior.
Okay.
Endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin.
Okay, so let's break those down one by one.
Yeah.
So endorphins, when I think of endorphins, I always think of runner's high, right? They sort of mask pain.
Right. It's that feeling you get when you push yourself physically.
Yeah, and keep us going when things get tough.
Exactly.
What about dopamine?
So dopamine is all about pleasure and reward. It's that feeling we get when we accomplish a goal.
Right.
When we achieve something.
When we check something off our list.
Exactly. It's what motivates us.
Yeah.
It pushes us to strive for more.
But there's a catch, right?
There's a catch.
Like too much of a good thing.
Exactly. Dopamine is also the chemical of addiction.
Oh.
Right. So think about how obsessed our society is with hitting those quarterly numbers.
Getting those likes on social media.
Exactly.
Are we chasing a dopamine rush?
I think in many ways we are. And, Sinek argues that our modern world with its abundance and abstraction has really thrown these chemicals out of whack.
Okay, so we're going to dive into that more in just a second. But
sounds good. It's like we're constantly bombarded with these stimuli that trigger these dopamine releases.
Right, and it's so easy to get hooked on that feeling.
It is. It's like you get a notification on your phone, dopamine spike, you feel a sense of reward.
Right, but then you need more and more.
Exactly, and over time that reward pathway gets desensitized.
Right, it's like you build up a tolerance.
You do, and it takes more and more stimulation.
To get the same effect.
Exactly, and that's the trap of instant gratification.
So what's the antidote?
Yeah, how do we bring things back into balance?
Especially in a world that's designed to, constantly bombard us with stimuli.
It's a tough question, but Sinek offers some insights.
Okay.
And he highlights some pretty sobering examples of what happens when dopamine takes over.
Okay.
Think about Jack Welch's rank and yank system at GE.
Oh, yeah.
Where employees were constantly pitted against each other.
Right. It was like survival of the fittest.
Exactly. And it led to this culture of fear and anxiety.
That doesn't sound like a very healthy circle of safety.
No, not at all. It created an environment where individual achievement fueled by dopamine trumped everything else.
Collaboration, teamwork.
Long-term sustainability.
It's like a very short-sighted approach.
It is. It's all about winning at all costs.
Right.
Even if it means sacrificing the well-being
of the people.
Of the organization.
And it's interesting because Sinek contrasts that with the example of Costco.
Yeah.
And its co-founder, James Sinegal, who prioritized employee well-being.
Right.
And fostered a culture of respect.
A very different approach.
And look at them. They're thriving.
They're a testament to the idea that putting people first can lead to lasting success.
Okay, so we've talked about endorphins, dopamine.
Right.
What about serotonin?
So serotonin is interesting. It's associated with feelings of pride and status.
Okay, so how does that fit into the workplace?
It's about feeling significant, valued by the group.
So it's not just about individual achievement, but how that achievement is recognized by the group.
It's that boost you get when you receive recognition for a job well done.
Right, or when you feel like you're contributing to something bigger than yourself.
Exactly, and leaders who understand this can tap into the power of serotonin.
Okay.
By celebrating team wins, by publicly acknowledging individual contributions, and by fostering a culture of appreciation.
So it's about creating those little rituals, those moments of recognition.
Those things matter.
That can really boost morale and motivation.
They do. They make people feel seen and valued.
Okay, so we've got endorphins, dopamine, serotonin.
Right.
What about oxytocin?
Oxytocin. This is the glue that holds it all together.
Okay.
This is the chemical of trust and connection.
Okay.
Released through physical touch, acts of kindness, genuine social interaction.
So like warm hugs, heartfelt handshakes.
Yeah.
Those moments of genuine
And
connection.
make you feel like you belong. Yeah. And Sinek makes a really compelling point about how our increasingly virtual world can actually starve us of oxytocin.
Because we're not getting that face-to-face interaction.
Exactly. Think about the limitations of email, text, even video calls.
Yeah.
They can't fully replicate
Right.
the richness and depth of in-person interaction.
And he brings up Dunbar's number.
Yeah.
That idea that we can only maintain about 150 meaningful relationships.
It's a fascinating concept.
It makes you think about the quality.
Right.
Not just the quantity of our connections.
Absolutely. And this has major implications for the workplace.
Yeah.
Leaders need to create opportunities for real in-person connection.
Yeah.
It's about fostering a culture where people feel comfortable collaborating,
sharing ideas,
building genuine relationships.
And Sinek tells this amazing story.
He does.
About a leader who understood this intuitively.
Captain David Marquet, who took command of the USS Santa Fe.
Which was a nuclear submarine.
A nuclear submarine.
That was...
Not exactly top performing.
Not exactly.
It was actually ranked dead last.
Oh, wow.
But what Marquet did was revolutionary.
Okay.
He realized that the traditional command and control leadership style wasn't working.
Okay.
So he flipped the script.
How so?
He empowered his crew to think for themselves.
To question orders.
To take ownership of their work.
It's like he gave them permission to use their brains.
Exactly.
Not just follow orders blindly.
And the results were remarkable.
Okay, tell me.
The Santa Fe went from worst to first, becoming the top-performing submarine in the fleet.
So it's possible to turn things around.
It's a testament to the power of trusting your team and fostering a culture of thinking and creating that strong circle of safety.
I love that story.
It's a good one.
And something else that Sinek talks about that I found really interesting is this connection between leadership and abstraction. He argues that when we start treating people like numbers on a spreadsheet, we lose sight of their humanity.
We dehumanize them.
And he uses this really powerful example.
The Milgram experiment?
Yes.
A classic study.
So for those who maybe aren't familiar with that, can you give us a quick rundown?
Sure. So the Milgram experiment was this study where participants were told they were taking part in a learning experiment. And they were instructed to administer electric shocks.
To another person?
To another person.
Wow.
Every time that person got an answer wrong.
Okay.
And the shocks increased in intensity with each wrong answer.
And the person receiving the shocks was an actor.
Right. They weren't actually being shocked, but the participants believed they were.
Wow.
And what was shocking
Intended.
was how many participants were willing to administer these increasingly painful shocks.
Even though they could hear the person screaming in pain.
Just because an authority figure told them to?
That's a pretty chilling reminder.
It is.
Of how easily we can disconnect from the consequences of our actions.
When we're distanced from the human impact.
Right. It's like when you're just looking at numbers on a screen.
Exactly.
You forget that there are real people.
On the other end of those decisions.
And this happens all the time in the corporate world, right?
It does.
When we're so focused on hitting targets.
Maximizing profits.
It's easy to lose sight of the people who are impacted
by those decisions.
And Sinek also talks about how this plays out in our reaction to large-scale tragedies. Like we might feel deeply moved by a single relatable story, but then numb when confronted with the suffering of millions.
He uses the example of the Syrian civil war, comparing the limited emotional impact of the staggering death toll to the powerful story of a young woman who witnessed a hit-and-run accident and was profoundly affected by the death of a single individual.
So it's like our brains are wired to connect.
With individual stories.
It's not an abstract number.
It's easier to empathize with one person than with a faceless mass.
So what's the takeaway for leaders here?
The takeaway is to bring things back to the human level. Make it personal, relatable. Connect decisions to their real-world impact on individuals.
Show the faces.
Exactly. That's how you build empathy.
And prevent that dangerous disconnect.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about the circle of safety.
The
chemicals of connection. The dangers of abstraction. What else does Sinek highlight as being crucial for effective leadership?
Well, he talks a lot about integrity
Okay.
and vulnerability.
So it's not about being perfect.
No.
It's about being real.
It's about owning up to your shortcomings.
He shares a story about a Marine Corps colonel
He does.
who dismissed a promising officer
Yeah.
from a leadership program.
Not for making a mistake,
Well,
but for lying about it. The colonel argued that trust is paramount in a high-stakes environment.
Right.
Leaders who are honest,
Yeah.
even when it's difficult,
Yeah.
build credibility and strengthen the bonds within their team.
It's like admitting your mistakes.
Yeah.
Actually makes you a stronger leader.
It shows that you're human,
Yeah.
that you're not afraid to be vulnerable.
And Sinek contrasts this
Mm-hmm.
with an example from the corporate world.
Yeah.
Bank of America's attempt to implement a debit card fee.
Right.
They faced this massive backlash.
Huge backlash.
Yeah. And eventually apologized and reversed the decision.
It's a classic example of how prioritizing short-term gains over the well-being of your customers can backfire.
Big time.
Yeah. Leaders who are willing to admit mistakes and prioritize people over profits ultimately build stronger relationships
Right.
and a more sustainable business.
It's about playing the long game.
Exactly.
It seems like there's this common thread running through all these examples.
What's that?
It's about building and maintaining that circle of safety,
Absolutely.
even when it's tough.
Even when it's hard.
And Sinek doesn't shy away from tackling some of the bigger challenges
No, he doesn't.
facing our world today,
Right.
including polarization.
Yeah.
He argues that this win-at-all-costs mentality,
Right.
fueled by our dopamine-driven culture, is tearing us apart.
In politics, in business, everywhere.
Yeah, it feels like we're constantly being told,
Right.
you got to win.
Win at all costs.
Crush the competition.
Yeah.
Be number one.
It's a relentless pressure.
It is, and it's exhausting.
Yeah, and it can actually be really detrimental.
In what way?
Well, Sinek uses the example of Newt Gingrich's rise to power in Congress.
Okay.
Gingrich's strategy was all about partisan warfare.
Right, demonizing opponents.
Winning at any cost.
Yeah, it seems like that's become the norm in politics these days.
It has, and it's created this toxic environment.
Yeah, where compromise is seen as weakness.
And cooperation is almost impossible.
So what's the long-term cost of that kind of thinking?
Well, Sinek argues that it's eroded our ability to solve problems together.
We're so focused on beating the other side
Exactly.
that we forget about actually addressing the issues.
He points to the decline in congressional cooperation,
The rise of gridlock.
the inability to address critical issues facing our society.
Like climate change healthcare.
Yeah, the list goes on.
It's like we're stuck in this perpetual stalemate.
And it's not just politics.
Right. This kind of thinking seeps into business as well.
Absolutely.
Sinek connects this short-term profit-driven mentality
Yeah.
to the 2008 financial crisis,
Right.
arguing that the pursuit of immediate gains,
Blinded many to the systemic risks that we're building.
it's like we were also focused on making a quick buck,
Exactly.
like we didn't see the bigger picture,
He uses the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act as an example.
which had separated commercial and investment banking.
Right, and that repeal was
Yeah.
driven by this desire for deregulation
To free up the markets.
and allow for more profit.
But it also created the conditions.
For the kind of risky behavior that led to the crisis.
Right. It's like we took the guardrails off.
And then we were surprised when the car went off the road.
It's a powerful reminder that short-term thinking
Yeah,
can have long-term consequences.
absolutely.
So how do we break free from this win-at-all-costs mentality?
Well, Sinek talks about the importance of shifting our focus from competition to collaboration.
So it's not about beating each other.
No.
It's about working together.
To achieve common goals.
And he also talks about the unique challenges facing Generation Y.
Those who've grown up in a world of instant gratification.
Right. They've never known a world without the internet.
Smartphones, social media.
It's easy to see how that could impact their worldview.
Sinek argues that while technology has brought many benefits,
Sure.
it's also created a culture of impatience
Right. We want everything now.
and a susceptibility to addiction.
Think about the addictive nature of social media.
The constant stream of notifications and likes.
The pressure to curate a perfect online persona.
It's a recipe for anxiety, loneliness, and a constant craving.
For external validation.
We're trading real-world connection and genuine accomplishment for fleeting digital dopamine hits.
So how do we find meaning and fulfillment in a world that's increasingly wired
for instant gratification?
It's a tough question, but Sinek highlights a powerful example from John a recovering alcoholic.
who found solace and support in Alcoholics Anonymous.
So it's about finding your tribe,
Your community.
the people who get you,
Who share your values.
who support you through challenges.
And Sinek argues that that sense of belonging, of shared struggle,
is something that's crucial for all of us, not just those overcoming addiction.
Exactly.
He says it's not just about celebrating successes.
No.
It's about going through tough times together.
Think about how communities come together after natural disaster.
Or how soldiers bond in the trenches.
It's in those moments of adversity, those shared struggles, that the strongest bonds are formed.
It's like that saying, what doesn't kill us together makes us stronger together.
Exactly.
So maybe a little bit of shared struggle is a good thing.
It can be.
It's about finding those opportunities
To build those bonds.
to create that circle of safety.
Not just when things are good.
But especially when things get tough.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive
It has.
into Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last.
A really thought-provoking book.
It is.
With a lot of important insights.
So what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the biggest one is the importance of creating that circle of safety.
In our workplaces.
In our families, in our communities.
It's about fostering those chemicals of connection.
Endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin.
It's about leading by example.
Being the kind of leader who prioritizes people over profits.
Who's willing to sacrifice personal gain.
For the good of the group.
Who embodies that leaders eat last mentality.
Absolutely.
And it's about remembering that we're all in this together.
We are.
We need each other.
We do.
And we're stronger when we work together.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So if you're looking to create a more human-centered
and balanced culture
in your own life, I highly recommend checking out Leaders Eat Last.
It's a great read.
It is.
Full of inspiring stories and practical advice.
And who knows, it might just change the way you lead.
And the way you live.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. That way you won't miss any of our updates. Also, if you think this video could help others, please share it with them. Thanks for watching and for your support.